Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Riverdale, Season 7, Episode 10. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, let's start off with Jughead and Tabitha's side of things. Obviously, we had the whole, continuing the whole Brad Berry situation, and obviously, Sheriff Keller asked if, Ray Berry had any extended family, and Jughead doesn't know, but he knows of a wife that he mentioned in passing, but doesn't really know how to get in contact with her. So with Tabitha's help, they start going through his apartment, and they end up finding like a picture of someone named June, and then there's letters addressed to her because it's the address in South Carolina that he got from the guy from Pet Comics. And it turns out because he had been sending a portion of his checks there, and we find out that Brad Rayberry was in an interracial relationship with a woman named June. It was his wife, and they were apart from each other. And I guess that's also why Jughead kind of found him sadly in the somewhat sad state he was kind of in, because it's like, right, he was in love with a woman, he had to leave her behind, because them being together was drawing too much attention, burning cross in there. Like, it's like it would have put her family in so much danger, and he didn't want that. He wanted to save up enough money with his stories to be able to buy her parents a new place to live, or her family a new place to live, while her and him would go and live in Paris. And it's sad that things would kind of be cut so short, but it's like, right, why would someone who's got such a goal in mind, but this is also that conversation of you never know what someone's going through mentally, but it's like, even when someone seems like they're on top of the world, you never know what they're going through. But we as the audience know he had more to live for because of what we learned this episode, but also we know he was murdered. It was just made to look like a suicide. But yeah, he was working. Like I said, maybe his money situation wasn't going the way he was. Like I said, when it felt like he was a little downtrodden when kind of down on his luck when Jughead met him, and I think that's probably why. And it's just, I think for him, like as his wife says, it's like he was always an optimist, despite what life threw at him. I think he might have been on a downswing, but Jughead brought that. I think that spark in him again. He was rewriting like that story he was going to try and get. Like that novel he was going to get published, or like one of the stories he was going to get adapted or whatever. So it is that thing of like, I think Jughead probably reminded Brad of himself when he was his age, and it kind of renewed his kind of faith in people, I think, and it just made his goal that much more, maybe more attainable. And I think that's what gave him the real kick in the butt that he needed. Like meeting Jughead pushed him in the right direction, where it's like, I'm that much closer to making our dream, him and his wife's dream, come true. But for things to kind of be cut short this way is so sad. And obviously there's stuff that, Sheriff Keller was like, hey, did you know he was a communist? He was into drugs. He was in an institution, and he was anti the Korean War. But his wife presented the perspective of, yes, you can isolate things and be like, yeah, there's this. And that's a sad thing that in that regard, like that's all like, hey, these are these things about Brad, but they didn't have context. They were just, here are things about Brad without the nuanced conversation of the reason why he was anti the Korean War is because he served in World War II. He saw what war was, and he didn't want other young people going out there dying like that. That it can instill someone to be very anti-war, at a time where it's like, hey, it's very patriotic to be pro-war. The drugs, it's because he was severely injured in battle, and it helped him like with his injuries, and because of his addiction and stuff, he ended up voluntarily putting himself in a institution to, rehabilitate himself. It was a rehab of sorts. So it's like, once again, it's all this nuance that like all Sheriff Keller's file had was about this and that. And it's like, yes, he was part of, like, he went to some communist meetings because he was young, he was angry, and he was lost. And he was, no, not angry, but he was curious, and lost, So, but that shouldn't define him out of something he did in his young age, especially because you're isolating these instances out of someone's life and not looking at the greater context of what they represented in this person's life. And that is kind of sad to think about. I mean, it's kind of putting things in perspective too. It's like kind of a morbid conversation, but it's like, yeah, that thing of what will people be able to put, like, for you, like, when it all comes down to you and your file and stuff like that, what will your file say about me? Mine won't say much about me. Like, I'm sadly going to be that type of person of, like, yeah, everything of me will probably like, and not like all the things I have, like, but like anything of sentimental value probably could fit in a box because I'm that type of person. But it's also like, it's kind of sad that, like, I mean, and that's also the conversation about death. Like, right, someone can be, an entire life can be reduced to a box, and in this case, an entire life can be reduced to a file. Yeah, it's a pretty thick file, but it's also these little things about him, like I said, without the greater context and nuance. So I thought that was kind of a powerful thing. And obviously, it's like, there's a lot of people who could have wanted to hurt Brad, and because from June's perspective, it's like, right, we've seen firsthand the evil that this world is capable of. And so for her, it's like, she's not going to stop Jughead from looking into it because Jughead wants to get justice for his friend and his mentor, and especially knowing, like, the life he won't be able to leave, you know. And for June, she's going to, you know, go back home and try and get Brad's novel published because he was close to getting it published, and Jughead's going to continue adapting his books, and he's going to try and send some of that money towards June and her family. And she'd even asked about Tabitha and Jughead, but they were like, no, we're pals. Yeah, we're just good friends. She's like, yeah, but, like, you know, kind of look after each other. That's what's really important. So it does spark something between them. It was there, but neither one of them was kind of fully taking the lunge. But I think this might have been the kick in the pants they needed. It's the kick in the pants Tabitha needed, because she's like, she needed to kind of, like, with just the atrocities and all the terrible stuff she saw when she was on tour with Miss Till, it was kind of like, hey, I had to come back to Riverdale, kind of recharge. But now it's like, no, I had all the motivation and reasons to begin with, but this was just another reason to kick a kick in the pants, a kick in the butt, to just kind of, like, keep going, that this work is too important, you know. And even Jughead's like, yeah, what you do is meaningful, helping people, you know, be able to kind of live free, to be able to love who they want to love and not be chastised or threatened or even killed because of it. So she is going to go on tour. It's kind of, you know, it's like, right, they kind of have their little moments, but even Jughead was like, right, when you're on tour, I will give you back, I will make sure you get your homework this time, but also send you some letters. And I was like, the way she looked at it, I thought Jughead was going to be like, I mean, not those type of letters, but I think it's like the fact that he didn't say anything, just kept looking like, no, those type of letters, like, we can kind of figure this out. So it's kind of sad they won't be able to be around each other, but it's a thing of, like, Jughead recognizes, like, what she's doing is important, and what she's fighting for is something very meaningful and important. So, but with the ending of the episode and kind of wrapping up the Jughead side of things, Jughead ends up hearing from a neighbor who was like, oh yeah, does he have any extra milk? I was like, oh. And it's like, no, he doesn't have any. She's like, oh, that's weird. I wonder where the milk bottles went. And he's like, wait, what do you mean? She's like, I heard the milk bottles last night. Like, the milkman got here exceptionally late. And Jughead knows from Ethel's situation of, like, the milkman she saw. And so it's like, right, so the pieces are coming together a lot quicker than I thought they were. So I think this murder mystery element is going to probably be a bigger and bigger element as we go forward. It just seems like it's mainly Jughead looking into it now. And obviously he'll probably bounce in some of the... Because once again, I think it'd be interesting if Jughead did, like, look at the suicide. Like, I thought him looking at there might not have been a suicide letter. Like I said, I don't know if Sheriff Keller ever said he found one or not. Maybe that was always just my presumption. Like, I think that was a presumption I had when Jughead found out, and it was like, oh, he killed himself, and I was like, quote unquote, killed himself. So I'm like, I don't remember if they ever actually said there was a suicide note or not. That's why I thought, like, Jughead would be able to read and be like, no, this isn't Mr. Rayberry's. I mean, it still could have been written like him if, you know, the person who's covering it up. Because even Jughead is like, yeah, like, faking a murder and disguising it, taking a murder and disguising it as a suicide is something directly out of, like, it's a big thing in detective fiction. So he, you know, it's not like this is that uncalled of. It's not like this is completely out of nowhere type of thing. So, but, like, this was an interesting lead in development, because not only is he going to this is going to not only help with the Radberry stuff, it's also going to help with the Ethel thing too. But I think, once again, I brought this up previously, the key factor and the interesting development is that was a brutal murder to make Ethel the suspect. Was that always the purpose, or she just happened to be the perfect patsy for it? That's the thing. But also, why kill them that way and then stage Radberry's death as a suicide, like changing the method. Once again, I'd said this before, changing your methodology as a killer, as we can see, well, you're a serial killer. Like, fact is, you're changing at every crime. It's like, I feel like that's not that common, but so that's definitely going to be interesting to see, like, kind of understand what the purpose of that is. Like I said, like, why go from such a brutal way of handling things to kind of hiding what you did? I guess because you were too high profile, there was too much notice on what you did, so you're like, I got to change things up. And the fact is, he walked down the hall and the lights were flickering. Like I said, there's also the fact is this is connected to a comic book, is where they thought Ethel got the idea from about the milkman. So I'm like, there has to be like a supernatural element, like whether he's like the devil or whether he's just kind of a serial killer who made a deal with the devil. As we know, he is a prominent. I forgot his name in this. It's not Mr. Swift, is it? Was that his name? I don't remember the devil's name in this universe. We met him well, he was in last season of Riverdale. I don't remember. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see what kind of more about diving on that front. Another side of the episode is the Black Athena Club, obviously. Their gatherings and discussions about the books and the black authors that they're reading and like the messaging and meanings behind it. And Cheryl feeling a little left out because she doesn't get to spend as much time with Tabitha because Tabitha's got this. And I don't know if it's really like the Serpents, but other stuff. And Cheryl's got the Vixen. Well, she's got Black Athena and she's got like the Dark Room stuff. And now she's also, like, Cheryl's got the Vixens and stuff. And so like they don't really have as much time for each other. And so Cheryl wants to at least like stop by Black Athena because it's like I could be in the corner. I don't have to say anything, but it could be my way to hear about this thing that's so important to you that you're so passionate about. I get to kind of experience part of that and understand like why it means so much to you. But also it's an excuse for us to spend time together. But Tony made an excuse, like, be like, oh, we can work on it by the end of the semester, try and, like, you know, get everyone more comfortable, you know? And especially because Black Athena just started, I wanted to make sure it's more well established. Well, it turns out Kevin got to go, which I was like, oh, that, because Tony has had that push and pull with Cheryl, but I'm like, I thought we were kind of past that. But it's because she was on some level worried that, hey, Cheryl wouldn't fit in, that Cheryl would make others feel uncomfortable, that Cheryl will feel uncomfortable, that maybe she wouldn't say the right thing. And she had those same concerns. But the book they ended up reading actually resonated with her she says, in a way that she is kind of sad to read, because like there was a story that revolved around a particular family, and she saw too many unpleasant parallels between the family, that kind of not so good family in the book in comparison to her own. So it is a situation of, it kind of gave her a different perspective and hearing their thoughts about the book. And then also, you know, they're asking like, oh, is this your first black author book? And she's like, yes, sadly it is, but she'd love to read more. And Clay's going to give her a list, because he's like, right, I don't care like who you are or where you're from. These are stories and books I believe everyone should read. And it is this thing of, everything ultimately worked out, because I was kind of nervous too. I was like, oh man, is Cheryl going to say the wrong thing? But it's like, no, Cheryl recognized how important that place is, what was being spoken about, what truths were being talked about, what discussions were being had, that she was honoring that space, because she also would never do anything that would hurt like something that's so important to Tony, recognizing, because that place of freedom, you know, to be able to kind of talk about these type of issues and things is also important to the conversation between Tony and Cheryl. It's the same thing of like, it's still back to that conversation with Jughead and Tabitha in the episode about, right, her fighting for people being able to love who they want to love, and that kind of that same thing applies here. And even Cheryl being like, right, I'll go to the more public ones, but I see how important Black Athena is to you, and I want to keep it like your thing. Like I someone from the outside shouldn't just kind of show up whenever I want to. Like it was, I'm glad I got to experience, because it is an important thing that I got to see that and understand and share and hear these ideas and perspectives on a world that I knew nothing about. Like I have this outside perspective, and I was able to peek into that world, and I want to keep taking a dive and learn more in that world from the books I'm going to read from Clay. But this is still something that is yours, and I don't want to take away from that, but I will show up at public meetings, and there's the thing, a public reading she's going to be doing, and it's like, I will be there front row. So that's really beautiful, and I think it's just helped bring them closer on so many fronts, not just on a relationship front, but on a personal level, which kind of is interesting. And when you take that in juxtaposition with their kind of in a similar regard, but in a different relationship manner, is the Archie and Reggie of it all. Them getting all buddy and geeking out about the hot rod and everything. I was like, I brought it up previously of like, it's so interesting because Archie and Jughead have not had a lot of alone time in this season. It's like I had brought it up that Reggie is filling that Jughead role to some extent, and it's like, yeah, because Jughead and Archie were besties, but like they strayed a little bit. They were kind of not like as close as they used to be at the beginning of this series, but like Jughead living at Archie's place, like eventually like brought them closer. They became like brothers, and the same thing happened with Reggie. And it's, yeah, siblings do that. They fight, they disagree, especially when they kind of have this date situation, which I immediately would have been like, oh, Reggie's going to take Veronica on a date in the car. Like, I would have been like, oh, Reggie, do you mind? Like, we can make it a double date. Like, that could have been the easy solution, which it comes down to a date regardless. But the problem is, like, both of them dropped the bag when it came to the respective situations, because Archie kind of dropped the bag when it came to Betty and Reggie on the Veronica front. Because they were both so preoccupied. Because Archie had an issue with Reggie taking the car, which I love that he was sitting in the dark, turned on the light. He's like, where were you, Mr. Mantle? And I'm like, look at Archie going dad mode. Give me the keys. That's the last time you're driving my car. I'm like, he went super dad mode, but it's because that car is so important to him. It's the last connection he has with his dad. You know, like, luckily he has basketball in this car, but this car is something they worked on together. Basketball is something he's following in his dad's shoe, and I think he probably, like, played a little bit with his dad, but like, this is something they worked on not only for months, years together. And this was a project, and it's like they got it fixed up right before his dad went off to war. So like, there is this special connection, and Reggie, for him, like, you driving off with it just makes me feel a way. And you know, but his uncle was telling him, was like, yeah, but give the kid a break. The kid's away from home, away from his family, and he has to be somewhere he's not really that familiar with. So it's like, you know, and Archie does apologize to him, and because Reggie did say like, oh, I wanted to hit the highways to kind of feel better, but the two of them still butt heads. I mean, they had their bro moments where it's like, because their bromance is getting in the way of their potential romances with like Betty and Veronica respectively, but like they were so fixated and like, oh my god, the car is like, oh yeah, this and that, but they ended up running out of gas. And I love them like duking it out, like wrestling and like putting each other in headlocks on the highway. I'm like, it was like, I love the moment, because I was also like, sadly they're not going to think much of it, because it's like, hey, it's Riverdale, yeah, the Ethel thing happened, but that's the only terrible thing. So they're not thinking like, probably not a good idea to leave Betty and Veronica by, you know, like the chivalrous thing would have been like, hey, one of you stay behind type of thing, but that probably would have led to more issues. But it all worked out in the end. They went with Midge, Cheryl, and Tony to Fang's concert, which we'll talk about a little bit. But they butted heads, and now actually, you know, because it's like, Reggie has his issues with Archie, and he thinks Archie has issues with him, and then that kind of makes them bump heads even more. And Pops is like, hey, there's actually a jalop in my garage. Like, you can take it. It's kind of run down. You can work it. That way you can have a car of your own. And on the way back, they both were very, like, open about everything, where Reggie actually went, the drive wasn't, like, to the freeway like he made it sound like. He actually went to go see his parents because he missed them. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to be that kid that's saying, like, yeah, I miss my mom and my dad. Because he's also like, right. Because he didn't want to be in debts to the Blossom, because it's like, I can also understand that too, and Archie should have been more sensitive about that too, considering like, right, the Blossoms see him as kind of a means to an end. It's like, yeah, keep a smile on your face and work like you're supposed to, like that, do what you're supposed to be, like you're just supposed to make the basketball team better. We don't care about you. We don't see you as human otherwise, like you're just a means to an end. So Archie should have, but I get Archie being like, right, if the like Blossom's going to bend over backwards for you, like kind of take advantage of that, you know? But it's like, Reggie's circumstances, you really shouldn't have been like as insensitive about it as you were. But it's just that, yeah, Reggie, like there's someone literally paid to help his parents out at the farm. And so it makes him kind of feel like, I'm not right, that someone else is doing the work he wants to do, and also just away from his family. And he's homesick. And Archie understands that because he's like, yeah, I've been homesick. My dad went to Korea because, at the end of the day, my dad was my best friend. It's like, yeah, Jughead, like he's a swell dude and everything. I love that he was like, what was his name? Something Soup or whatever. It's like, he's like, Jughead? It's like, no, he's a good pal, but I can't talk to him about VIDS. It's like, well, what about Betty? It's like, well, it's like, yeah, she was a best friend, but it's like, yeah, that's complicated when you're feeling the way you do about her. So I think that's also the thing of like, yeah, they've easily become each other's best friends because for Archie, he hasn't really had like a best friend in that same capacity like he did with his dad since his dad died. And I think Reggie's kind of filling that void. So it's like you're kind of bumping heads with him about this car situation, but all in all, it kind of brought you closer to having kind of like a new like best friend / brother, I mean, they're both only child. They're only childs in their families too, so it kind of makes that even more poignant. So, it's sad that like Reggie's fixing up the car later on, but he's getting Betty's help, and I don't think Reggie's thinking too much about it because he knows how Archie feels about Betty, but it's like, yeah, she's a good mechanic, so like, yeah, I need her help, and so he's kind of feeling like the third wheel in the whole situation. So I don't know, because he wanted to help out, because I was like, oh, that'd be sweet, kind of like a brother thing, but it's like, no, Betty's in the mix, so all three of them might work on a car, or maybe just Archie might stop in from time to time just to see Betty, but Reggie might have done that just to be like, bro, I'm trying to give you an in. He's like, what? It's like, yeah, work on a car together with us, spend some quality time with Betty. I don't know. Or maybe it's just those two of them spending quality time together might end up because it was kind of like, because even Veronica suggested like, well, since the date didn't go well, how about we both switch dates? I'll kind of go out with Archie, you go out with Reggie. So maybe kind of a similar thing will happen where it's like, because Reggie and Betty are spending time together, it might lead to Veronica and Art. We'll have to wait to see how that kind of plays out, because they were kind of setting up at the beginning like, oh, there might be a Betty and Reggie thing. Oh, no, never mind. That same episode, they were kind of putting a kibosh on that, but now it's like, that might circle back around, so we'll have to wait and see. Another interesting side plot to this episode, obviously ends up being kind of this set piece a little bit, is like the whole thing with Fangs. Obviously he's got like a concert and he's like, if it's pretty big, like I'll be able to, music producers will be there, and he doesn't want Mitch there just because it's like, no, if you're there, it's a pretty rough side of town. Like, I definitely never like be in good graces with your parents if I let you go to such a place. I don't want to put you or our baby in a dangerous position. So I'm like, oh, sweet. And obviously the concert rocked, and he's seen as like a little bit of a celebrity coming back, like signing stuff for people, but he also ended up getting a record deal. But Midge did end up going, because she's like, I'm not going to miss one of your biggest shows of your career. And it's like, yeah, it ended up being kind of a lucky charm, and so it all worked out. So he is a step closer to finally feeling like he's worthy enough. And sadly, it probably won't be enough in the end. Especially in conjunction with like hey, not only am I going to be a rock star, we don't know if an older generation might not be too keen on it. It's like, oh, these kids and their damn rock and roll. Like, it probably won't hit, even with a record deal and stuff. I don't know. They might not still see that as something sustainable or as a career and stuff. So they'll probably still see him as like, oh, the serpent that he is, the thug that he is. But then, hopefully that's not the case. It is sad that he has to go so far, but I think it speaks volumes that he is willing to prove himself, trying to prove himself to Midge's parents so he can marry her and have that family together, So we'll have to wait and see where things kind of develop on that front. We are at the halfway mark for the show, so for this final season. So I am curious to see how things ultimately and continue to play out going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.